So hello everyone and welcome to our webinar to the series made by Interact or hosted by Interact. Today we are hosting as speakers two amazing women who are both leaders in their field. We have Pundak, who is the Executive Director of A Land for All, and we have Rana Salman, who is the Executive Director of Combatants for Peace. So as to start on time, first thing I'll be asking is Rana, May, welcome and thank you for being our speakers today. We are very happy to have you. I would like to give you some time to say hello and introduce yourself to everyone.
Rana, after you.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily, for this initiative and for inviting us actually for this webinar. We feel it's very important to raise women voices, especially in this difficult time. Well, for me personally, 3 years ago, I joined Combatants for Peace, which is a grassroots movement of Palestinians and Israelis working together to end occupation and bring peace, equality, and freedom to our homeland. And through our commitment to nonviolence since the creation of the movement, we use civil resistance, education, and other creative means of activism to transform the systems of oppression and build a free and peaceful future from the ground up. And I'm honored to be one of the few female CEOs leading this human rights movement in Palestine and Israel. Leading this role in a joint organization wasn't an easy journey, and it's probably more challenging while going through this crisis. We're still all grieving, still mourning for all the innocent lives that we have lost. I'm still shocked by the horrible news that we see daily. I'm sure we see different maybe media channels. Every day we wake up to unimaginable numbers of people killed. And I can't imagine how life must be difficult in Gaza right now as the people are dying, suffering, and starving, being homeless during this cold weather. So through our work, we try to raise awareness about what is going on. And I feel as a Palestinian, it's a very difficult time for me also right now, but May.
Yes, thank you, Rana. May?
Yeah, hi, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you Mejdi and Emily and Beth for organizing, and Rana for who you are and what you do. It's so hard to kind of jump into these events, you know, you work 24/7 here on the ground, and we're so overwhelmed, and now it's late night and here, and we're kind of you know, it's these events become this processing time that we don't have time to do during our days, and so I'm also grateful for that. I think that's actually really an interesting opportunity to kind of take time to think about what's going on every day. And I want to start with saying that yeah, we're in a terrible war. We're and the situation is tragic. Well, Emily, you asked me to talk about myself, but I don't know how to do that right now because I feel that maybe I'll just say a few words. My name is Pundak. I live in Jerusalem. I have 2 children, and I think that the reason why I do what I do is because this is my home and I don't have another home, and I will do everything I can to prevent my kids from living on either sides of this war, knowing that it is cyclical and that you know, you can be on top and you can be on the bottom, but we're all suffering from it one way or another, some much worse than others. You can't compare our privileged life right now in Jerusalem to what's going on in Gaza. But I know that what is happening in Gaza and what is happening in the West Bank and what is happening in East Jerusalem and what is happening to Palestinians inside of Israel is integrally connected and linked to me and my safety and my well-being. And I will do everything I can to fight for, you know, my home and for my kids to be able to live here in a way that isn't so tragic. And maybe I'll just say, yeah, I'm a human rights lawyer by training, but in the past years, I've been looking for something very valuable that I've lost along the way, which is vision and hope. And so I moved in the past couple of years to be the Israeli executive director of A Land for All, which creates an alternative vision for an Israeli-Palestinian two-state solution.
Thank you, man. Actually, this brings us to like mentioning your position, both of you as women. You're leaders in your own organizations. You are a role model. You are in the management, and you're also leading, which brings me to the question: is how did things change since October 7th? How are you handling things? What have changed? What are you doing? Rana, would you like to go forward for that?
Sure. Well, like to mention how the situation is like, because I live in Bethlehem, and I believe in the West Bank and in Israel as well, we are all denied our sense of security and safety, and we fear for our families, our friends, and for our collective futures. And since October 7th, there has been an increase of the settler violence in the West Bank, especially in Area C. There has been night raids into the cities and the refugee camps. We have seen what's going on in Jenin and Tulkarem, turning them into military zones. A few weeks ago, even like I woke up in the middle of the night and there were about 30 soldiers like in our neighborhood. So there's always these kind of feelings of fear and stressful times. And it was also the same for the movement. Since the events have been happening, we realized quickly that our joint community needed a safe place to grieve together and share our pain and to share our feelings in a safe space. So that's why we conducted several Zoom conversations, and they were very compassionate, very difficult conversations at times. There were maybe different arguments, but we continued to talk, even though that it was difficult. With the reality on the ground right now, it's very difficult to meet. So most of our work has turned into online. We also conducted several webinars for our international community because we felt we needed to connect with this community that is supporting us and believe in our vision and in our mission. So try to keep that conversation going and to continue our programs in a creative way through this difficult time. But it's very important to stay united, even in grief and pain.
For sure. Would you like to tell more about your vision and mission for those who don't know, who are with us today, but don't know enough Combatants for Peace?
Yeah, so Combatants for Peace, when it was first established, it was by former fighters, as I mentioned. So Israeli ex-soldiers who have joined in the army, Palestinian freedom fighters who were resisting in using violent means, and they spent some time in Israeli jails. And both of them realized that there is no military solution for this conflict, and the cycle of violence keeps just happening. And as Gandhi said, like an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So coming to this realization, and because they have been active in this violent conflict for over 20 years, we are trying to share our own experiences, like with the word that this is not gonna work. There is no military solution for this conflict. And for our past, because we have experienced that. Like for me personally, I'm not an ex-combatant. I've never been in that direction, but currently, because the movement is open to everyone who believes in nonviolence and in our shared resistance to all kinds of oppression from both sides. And sorry, I missed your your second
It
question.
was just for you to talk about Combatants for Peace for those who don't know it.
Yeah, so we run several programs. Like as I mentioned, through activism, our activists are joining the weekly protest, for example, right now in Israel, every Saturday with the different human rights organization, the coalition against the occupation, raising their voices against asking for a ceasefire and ending this bloodshed, calling for a hostage release and end to this bloodshed and loss of innocent lives. And we also continue with our educational programs. As I mentioned, it's very difficult to meet in person, so we try to continue online, like with our young activists, to continue their workshops and meetings, and through also our solidarity actions within the Jordan Valley, escorting the shepherds, especially in these areas, because to protect them from settler violence. And in addition to the international campaigns to raise awareness about how's life like right now for both sides.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rana. I'm going to repeat the same question of how has things changed since October 7, and how are you handling things as a woman in a leading position?
Try to start with some hope, because there's so little of it, and I think that actually both Rana and I, and probably you as well, like have a big privilege and gift to be working in a space that generates hope just by virtue of who we are and what we do. And I think that's really important to share and to spread that resource as wide as possible. So I hope it can be resourceful to all of you. But you know, Land for All, I'll just say a word about Land for All. Land for All is an Israeli-Palestinian movement. The idea has been around for nearly 12 years. It was born around the social demonstrations in 2011, after having the biggest demonstrations for social justice in Israel, and no one even, you know, talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And that was a time where negotiations stopped, and where, you know, the normalization and this everything that we're seeing, the backlash now of shrinking the conflict, managing the conflict, normalizing the conflict, has become, you know, more and more stronger. And you see, you know, hundreds and thousands of Israelis demonstrating and politically activated, and no one's talking, let alone about occupation, but also not about, you know, our future, our viable future, as if the conflict isn't connected to all of that. And so that was when the movement was born. And it was born by Israelis and Palestinians who kind of refused to accept that situation. And what they said was, you know, we are stuck in this fake status quo. When people are saying, oh, you know, this binary of one state, two states, that's not realistic. That's not realistic. We can't do that. We can't do that. And so we remain in this status quo, right? Which is, of course, not static. It's creeping apartheid, or creeping annexation, or deepening of occupation, or whatever we want to call the awful reality on the ground. And what this group of people came and did is to start it as an exercise in political imagination, saying like, okay, you know, the classic two-state solution feels less and less relevant, less and less achievable. So we can't continue advocating for it. And at the same time, we can't not have, you know, we can't have a void, because that leads us back to this, like, there's nothing to do situation and mentality. And so what they did is to come up with a new paradigm, right? With a new idea of how to make the two-state solution relevant again. And therefore our tagline is 2 states, 1 homeland. And the realization of the fact that we let's be honest, like no one's going anywhere, right? I mean, we can talk about decolonization and we could talk about transfer of Palestinians to Egypt or to Africa or to whatever this crazy government is talking about right now. But at the end of the day, Israelis and Palestinians are not going anywhere. And that's the starting point. And if that's the starting point and the realization that I think has been overseen, I don't know if that's the right expression in English, but like people haven't taken seriously the fact that Israelis and Palestinians feel a very strong sentiment to this homeland and to the entirety of it, what we call from the river to the sea, right? That's just reality. And if we start from that reality, and I think one of our commitments is to look reality in the eyes and to respond with something pragmatic that will both hold our values, but also be very, very realistic and based on the facts on the ground. And the fact is that Israelis and Palestinians see this homeland as their homeland. And this normally leads to a zero-sum game solution. And we're trying to advocate for something else, more of a confederative model. So 2 states, but in one kind of bigger infrastructure inspired by the EU, perhaps having some mechanisms for what we share. And maybe if it's okay, Emili, I'd like to talk later about the paradigm of sharing and the paradigm shift from separation and isolation to sharing, partnership, and tight collaboration. But I'll say a few words about that later, if that's okay. And maybe also about our pragmatic program. I'll just say that since October 7th, before October 7th, it was hard for us to convince people outside our circle that we have to have a political vision, that we have to end this conflict. Because for most people, and I include American Jews and in general the international community, and of course Israeli Jews, there was not a good reason to think that it's urgent to solve this conflict. And so for us, the main thing that happened on October 7th was this realization that the problem is not Hamas, although Hamas is a problem, and it's not even the settlers, and the problem is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That is the problem that we have in front of us. And if we identify the problem as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, then the only good news is that that conflict can be solved. Mm-hmm. They can be solved. And not only that can they be solved, is that even in Israel internally, we've already solved big conflicts that felt, incredibly unable to be solved, like the 73 war with Egypt. So it's even in our own small Israeli DNA to solve conflicts in order to achieve safety and security. And the other thing that Rana already said is that there's no military solution to this conflict. There is no military solution to this conflict. The military, I probably don't have to say to this crowd that what's happening in Gaza today will not bring safety to Israelis. It will not. It's not right now, and it won't in the future. And so what we are doing since October 7th is to push forward the fact that Israelis and Palestinians for 10 years have been working, researching, writing, advocating, thinking about a viable, sustainable, pragmatic, acceptable, shared solution that speaks to the interests of both people. And just to give an example of what we've been doing is that our first board meeting, and some of you know this, took place, our first shared board meeting. We've been functioning differently in Israel and Palestine. We've always been a shared movement, but we decided to move to a shared board of 7 Israelis and 7 Palestinians. And our first shared board meeting was on October 10th. And we've been meeting since and working together. So that's what we've been doing. We've been strengthening the partnership. We've been advocating. We've been writing policy papers, which I'm happy to talk about later. We've been organizing within Israel and Palestine, and our movement has grown in thousands of percent in the past 3 months, thousands. So it doesn't, the situation is still hell, but I can tell you that people are striving and looking for vision right now, and we have that.
Maya, I can see the passion when you are talking about the movement. Is this what women leaders bring to the movement?
I mean, I said this in the beginning because I think it was a very important realization for me. I started as a human rights lawyer, and I shifted because I understood that if I do this work in order to save Palestinians, that maintains a power dynamic that I understand is just irresponsible and won't work. You know, it's not honest and doesn't have integrity to it. And I had to give myself some really good answers to why I do the things that I do. And the answer was, I do it for myself. I want to end occupation and to because I know that my liberation just depends on yours, and I know that my kids won't be able to live in safety if you guys are not free. And so, although I would do everything for you two, because you are my partners and my friends, I do it for myself. And I think, you know, that's the kind of lioness mama mode that I'm in, just like fighting like crazy because I have nothing to lose, you know. This is my future, and these are my kids that I'm thinking about.
Which makes us all fighters in some kind. And
I
that
think
brings
so.
me to Rana, who's also in a leadership position in a combat movement. Although you said, Rana, that you were never a combat, but you are somehow a fighter. How is your feminism or your women role is bringing into that?
Yes, so that makes us all combatants, but in a non-violent way, let's say. Yeah, as I mentioned, like being in leading this movement in this role, especially in this time, wasn't also easy because everybody was shocked on October 7th, and everybody was in pain and very angry, very frustrated. So from both sides, and being in this position and being a female, you need to be like to contain all these feelings and all these emotions, all of this frustration, and transform it into something, into action, to something that is transformative, that is something more positive. And you don't have time, like actually to break down or like to let pain or grief like control you, because you need to be more stronger than that. And I think we have learned from previous experiences how women were actually the role was very essential in peace and reconciliation and negotiations, especially, for example, the women in Colombia being part of the negotiations and one like ceasefire and exchange of hostages. So history shows us how women role is very important in reconciliation. And right now we don't see many women voices because this war, it's not our energy. It's not something that we would create. We're all mothers, sisters, and daughters. We fear for our families, for our children, as May mentioned, and we want a better future for all of them. And we keep seeing all these horrific images coming from Gaza and from Israel. People still attending funerals for now, mothers writing their children's name over their arms in case they get killed or they were separated. It's very difficult for us, and women usually they don't go into conflict. And once women are involved in peace processes, as shown by research and like different studies, there is a chance that the peace will be sustainable for 15 years or more because of these voices. So this is also what is needed in this region, to have more role for women in leadership.
I think it's also, Emily, if it's okay, I just want to add that like we don't have any women right now leading this, you know, political reality. And if you go to even the media, right, there are no women there. They're just generals and ex-generals and more ex-generals. This is the smallest amount of women in any government in the past many years in Israel. There haven't been a lot of women also leading the demonstrations for, you know, and that's a whole other conversation to have about the previous 9 months of demonstrations in Israel for democracy and equality, and you know what's happening now and the connection between the two. But I really do feel that there has been a lack of women voices, and I don't agree with Rana. I'm not a conflict avoidant person. I like conflict. I strive in conflict, but I totally agree that thinking sustainably about things is something that I feel that at least when you're led by compassion, you have the ability, I think, to think more holistically about conflicts and about solutions as well.
Rana also said that a woman's role would be containing the conflict, which brings me to what you opened with, May, as saying that you are a mother of 2 children. How are you containing that with children as a mother?
That's a very personal question, and I don't know if I definitely don't have a thought out answer. I would say that first of all, you know, bli ayn hara, khamsa, 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 I'm on the most privileged end of this awful conflict. I mean, I'm scared for my life, and I'm scared for my children's life, and I'm scared to take the bus. And we've been in the shelters, and and I know so many people who have been killed and murdered and abducted, and I have friends in Gaza and all of that. But I'm at home. My partner is here with me. My kids are alive, and so I'm very grateful, and I have to start with that. And I, every night I dream that I am running away from war with my kids on me, and just, having these dilemmas of like, how do I carry 2 kids in a war while I'm dreaming these nightmares? It's very, 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 nothing is normal here. Nothing is normal. People are doing as if things are normal because people want to go back to normality, which I totally accept. But the truth is that having children right now is on one hand a huge gift, because you have to live your life. You can't like sink into depression and anxiety. You have to just function as a mom. And that gives me a sense of resilience because I have to function and keep going. And on the other hand, it's devastating because everything is so awful, and there's so much anxiety and fear, and my kid is talking about war all the time, and I see in my kids that they're vibrating with war, and they talk about it, and they're scared, and it comes up in their drawings, and I don't have the right tools to I can't even promise them anything except to say that, I'm here and I love them, and I'll do everything I can to protect them, and we're together. But honestly, that's very little.
Thank you, May. And
I also just want to maybe add one thing, Rana.
Yeah.
I guess that this speaks to you as well, that we have shitty leaderships. That's like the understatement of the life, right? Same for America. Like, I mean, I'm thinking about Donald Trump today, right? I'm just saying there is shit leaderships. Again, I'm trying to be we have awfully responsible leaderships in an awful situation. And so I think that there's also another level of being women and led by, these men that makes it extra frustrating and maddening, I would say.
It's indeed that we need more women in leadership, and we need more women in the field of peace building, and that's why we focused in Interact to hold these webinars for women's leadership. And I'm seeing all these people today who are eager to learn and to hear us and to hear what are we saying. And therefore, I would like to ask you, what can international do in their communities to respond to these crises, to support us in here? What's your message to them? Rana?
Well, the international community has a big role to do. Well, in order to start a process of negotiations towards a political solution against strong opposition in both societies, we need the support of the international community and like-minded movements and groups around the world. We urge people not to take sides, not to be pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, but to stand for a just solution that would benefit both societies. As I mentioned, we need a political solution to end the violence and begin also a process of rehumanization and reconciliation to prevent the violence from happening again and again, and to see the same October 7th again and again. And we just ask the international community not to give up on humanity, and to equally respect the lives of people, of all, and to oppose all these ideologies of hate and discrimination, supremacy that all lead us to destruction and death. It's also a very challenging time for us as a joint movements to continue working within this difficult time. As I mentioned, we have opposing societies, so it's not easy to do what we do. And it takes a lot of courage, a lot of strength also for Israelis to protest, for example, in the streets of Tel Aviv, asking for a free Gaza, and also for Palestinians to speak up at this time and not being getting arrested, for example, for what they are saying. So the international community has a big role, especially in the States. Also, we have seen so many solidarity marches like around the world, which was very inspiring. We see the people and the power of people like to change all the systems, all oppressive systems. So we urge them to continue, but also to hold our message, to be our voice, and not to be discriminatory in their callings, because it doesn't benefit anyone in that case. We also ask for the support of the international community, because financially, because without the generosity of international people who are strongly believe in our work and in our mission, it's many of our programs might not be achievable. And we urge them to continue to support these kind of movements so that we can continue moving forward toward a path of peace and nonviolence and reconciliation.
Thank you, Rana. May, do you have a message for the international community?
I have a few. Yeah, I totally echo everything that Rana said. I would definitely say that one thing is that we need a new narrative. We need a new narrative, and as Rana said, it has to be it has to throw away the zero-sum game. It's not helpful for anyone. It's not conducive anymore. And I also think that as we're seeing anti-Semitism rise around the world and Islamophobia rise around the world, I think that it's very important that we start realizing how interconnected we are as well. I mean, we talk normally about partnership between Israelis and Palestinians, but honestly, it's also between Jews and Muslims at this point of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I think that there has been for too long an acceptance and kind of a buy-in of the international community, as I said earlier, to accept the situation in Israel-Palestine. And my biggest fear is that October 7th won't change anything. And even though Joe Biden has said nothing will return to what it was on October 6th, and for us it was like, okay, so we're out of the status quo and we're moving into a path that would lead us to an end game and to peace. And this will be the beginning of the end. This October 7th will be the beginning of the end. My biggest fear is that it won't. It will turn into another cycle that we won't be able to handle these kind of cycles. And so my first call is to change the narrative and to get more involved and to make sure that we understand that all of our lives and all of our safety are at this point more connected than ever. And we all need to fight to solve and end this conflict. And when we say end and solve this conflict, it has to be a relevant and updated and agreed and just and equal solution. Otherwise, it will not work. And if we give all this energy to a solution that won't work, that might be even worse. And so I encourage people to, learn about our solution, but also just start thinking and asking difficult questions so that we have the right voices and right information and right knowledge and right people talking about this issue, about the day after. The day after is not tomorrow. It's not a conceptual idea. The day after is yesterday. Everything happening in Gaza today implicates the day after, meaning that we all, need an end game for sure, because without an end game, we will go back to the mistakes of Oslo of not having an end game and letting radicals who now control us lead the way again. So we have to have an end game, but we also have to understand that the more terror that we implicate on Gaza, the less opportunity there is for the day after. And so we have to start thinking today about that and connecting the dots between what's happening in Gaza today. And I haven't even talked about the threat that as we push on Gaza more, West Bank, East Jerusalem, Palestinians within Israel who are having a very, 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 very difficult time, Lebanon, Hezbollah, like at any moment, something can blow up, right? And this war can get even worse. And so we are obligated to right now commit to an end game. I'll also echo Rana saying we need your support. I mean, just very, very honest, our organization is working 4 times of its capacity right now. If I don't have the support to do this work, I won't be able to do it. And at this point, we are one of the few organizations of Israelis and Palestinians advocating, creating policy papers, writing, trying to build an actual movement for a better future in Israel Palestine. If we don't support these organizations now, we leave the void for organizations like the ones who want to reestablish Jewish settlements in Gaza and push Gazans out of Israel Palestine. That's the alternative. There's no middle anymore, right? You either choose life or you choose death. That's how I feel at this moment of Israel Palestine, and we all need to be in the life coalition. Being maybe more specific, I mean, there are many other ways to do it. I mean, write about us, invite us to events, write with us. If you are connected to policy and decision makers, please let us know that we're around. Let us, our voices be heard. We are on the ground doing the work. We know what we're talking about. So please take us into consideration when you talk to people about Israel Palestine. A lot of people don't know that this work even exists, that Israelis and Palestinians are fighting, let alone fighting together against the war and against inequality. I think both those two different levels, but we're doing both. And you're welcome to join our organizations. We have friends of in the US. We have a lot of opportunities to be engaged, and we need a huge society of supporters on every level to just echo these messages and make them into the mainstream and common sense of what should be the future of this region.
Thank you, May. And I'm going to add a third option of how could people support, and if they have the interest also to meet you in person, each one of you, and meet activists and people on the ground, is that our sister organization in Mejdi Tours is preparing for a trip in February 17th and March 9, hoping that tourism will come back here, but also that people still have the interest to meet people on the ground and visit all these organizations that are fighting together in order to have a peaceful reality in Israel Palestine. That I'll be sharing its link in the chat. And now
I'll also say that we're coming to the US in the beginning of February. So if people want to sign up for our newsletter or WhatsApp group, we can share the details and hopefully meet you in the US in February.
Now I would like to see the Q&A or the questions that are from our attendees. And one of the question is, what is the role of religion, and how is it helping or not? And what are the positions of the leadership, whether in Judaism, Christianity, or Islam? Which like whoever would like to answer the question, please go forward.
Rana, do you want me to take this one?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I started saying about that earlier. Of course, this is, this war and conflict is connected to so many different, layers of complexity between nationalism and between nation states and national movements and colonization and religion and land and trauma and ancestral trauma, and it's a big mess. Resources. But what I want to say and what I tried to advocate for earlier is that at this point we're all interdependent in a way, right? I mean, you can't even it's so different. It became much more difficult to even separate between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, which we've been talking about that separation, important differentiation for so long. But now even my Palestinian friends are saying, things are shifting. I mean, and you see in Sweden, Zionists marching with anti-Semites against Palestinians because they don't want, Arabs in Sweden. So it's getting really crazy. So I really think that we have to create this, coalition against racism. I mean, we have to put our values and our choosing our life and link them together and kind of create an alternative voice for that as well, moving from that binary. I will definitely say that when we think about sustainability in Israel-Palestine and a land for all, the issue of religion is one that we're investing in now more. The other one is climate, and I think that these two things are kind of complementary, right? When we think about climate in Israel-Palestine, that gives us a good understanding of how thinking through the paradigm of separation instead through the paradigm of like, we're stuck here together, we have to figure it out, is where it becomes real. If you think about water, or if you think about the sewage in Gaza now running into the Mediterranean and getting to Ashkelon and then to Tel Aviv after 2 days, if you think about the sanitary atrocities happening, a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and then you see the diseases that will come to the soldiers and then into Israeli society. So if we're trying to think, again, holistically and pragmatically and sustainably about the future of this region, we have to start addressing these bigger issues that will always be here. We have to think about them now.
Thank you, May. Actually, you answered 2 questions in one, which was my second question, so that's very good. So another question is, what is the percentage of Israelis who are promoting ceasefire within Israel at the moment? And could you share articles of local newspapers on that matter? Maybe you can tell us, both of you, of what are the communities around you cheering for, whether in Israel or in Palestine. Rana, do you want to answer that?
I'll share a little bit about Palestine because definitely there is a different power dynamic with this conflict, and people here are calling for a ceasefire and end to this bloodshed, because since the beginning of the war we have seen how many lives were lost also in Gaza, and people are still under the rubble. This also humanitarian crisis, people are starving, there is no health centers that are running like efficiently, there is no water for drinking that is clean, people are staying out in the tents and in the rain, in the mud, and in like horrible conditions, especially for women and for children. It's unbearable, and it's unthinkable to see how human beings are being treated right now, and the world is still staying silent or still like negotiating whether we should do a ceasefire or not. I think this is the main issue, is that we need to have a ceasefire right now and then sit and talk about the rest. Otherwise, we can't even talk while the war is still happening. And we have seen that it's growing, and there is a fear of like a regional war. We have seen with Yemen, we have seen with in the north with Hezbollah, with Iran recently there has been also like explosions. So it's kind of like growing fast in a way that is all violent, and it's getting like getting worse, and it's scary, like the direction that it's going to. That's why for Palestinians and also for Israelis, it's in our interest to stop this war and to end this, to have a ceasefire right now. It's very urgent.
Thank you, Rana. May? And also, just before you answer, May, can you please share the link of your itinerary in the US, as a lot of people are interested to follow up with you.
Yeah, I don't have it, but if you sign up to our newsletter or to our WhatsApp group or to both, you will definitely get it once it's ready. It's going to be ready next week, hopefully. So we would love to see you there. Okay, I'll start with maybe. So in Israel, the mainstream, and you know, I don't know if you know, but in Israeli media, you literally don't have anything about Gaza. You don't see any pictures, you don't hear any stories. I think Haaretz have kind of changed in the past few weeks to do more of that. Today there was a few testimonies of Gaza that were, as awful as you can imagine, and got some attention. But it's unbelievable, really. The discourse is the discourse of revenge. 7th of October has been, waking up all the traumas in Jewish society, and the discourse is of revenge, and and there's a genocidal discourse, without, naming what's happening in Gaza as a genocide, but just a genocidal discourse of people saying, like, just erase Gaza. Yeah, with all the doesn't matter, just erase it. 70% of the homes in Gaza have been ruined. So the discourse is there's a serious dehumanization of Palestinians in Israel right now. And I would say even more so that, again, like, we're talking about Gaza, but we're not talking about the displacements of or ethnic cleansing of communities in the West Bank that have been happening under, the war in Gaza, and no one has been noticing it. Communities who've been fighting for 20 years to stick to their small villages, and in the past 3 months have been kicked out. And then East Jerusalem, the violence in East Jerusalem, and then what's happening in Israel, which I think is really important to talk about, right? The dehumanization of Palestinians in Israel. I don't think this is even fair to say because it's too little, but the shrinking democratic space. I mean, Israel right now is not democratic for Palestinian citizens. People are being kicked out of work. Oh, sorry.
No, this is a very interesting point, May, that brings me to another question that I see in the chat is, how are you being perceived as a movement? And this is a question for both of you. How are you being perceived in the Israeli and Palestinian communities, and for those who are Palestinians and Israelis in the US?
Right. So I think those two questions are definitely connected. So I will say that being a Palestinian in Israel is unbearable, really. Like, you're being punished just for speaking Arabic in the streets. I mean, people are just the unemployment in Palestine in Israel has risen from, I think, 5% to 20, I think, percent in the past 3 months. So people are being, expelled from universities without any proper due process. And even demonstrations that were led by Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs within Israel, to call for a ceasefire were either brutally arrested and stopped by the police or not approved. I've been to a couple of those that were just unapproved by the police, or people have been arrested for Palestinian citizens of Israel, leaders, politicians have been arrested for demonstrating against the war, not saying anything against except for a ceasefire. That has been considered treason. And that goes as well for Israeli progressives, right? Israeli Jewish progressives. So the space for expressing any kind of, like, not revenge discourse has been impossible. But I will say that we've seen a change in the past 3 weeks. Definitely, we've been able to get more of our leaders on the media, speaking about a nuanced understanding of how we are going to pay the price for Gaza, and not only, just to push to demolish it. So there has been a change, and I want to even be more optimistic and to say that eventually people are going to be fed up by Netanyahu and realize that he cannot lead this war anymore. And I truly believe that, I mean, we're now organizing for this Saturday and next Saturday, a big rallies in Tel Aviv and Haifa with a few other sister organizations. And I want to believe that once we are able to actually be on the street without being arrested and without being considered too radical and crazy, more and more people will be joining just by virtue of having enough. Because the amount of suffering, not on Palestinians, just on the Israeli reality, Jewish reality right now, is getting to a boiling point. And I want to say that that's what we should be focusing on. And I apologize for being, I hope that you know that I stand in solidarity with you, first and foremost. But I think that for changing the reality, Israelis need to have enough. Israelis need to understand that they're paying a price. And that's very, very important, because I think that we're getting closer to that point. And just like in Northern Ireland, people were fed up by their own leadership, which is what allowed for the public psyche to change. And I think that I am praying that we're getting to that point, which will be a breaking point and a transformative point for the Israeli society. So we're on that trajectory, I want to say.
Thank you, May. Rana, can you tell us how are you perceived as a movement in the Palestinian society? How are you able to be in your role, and how you defend it, or are you outspoken, or how is it going?
Well, I think we had our own challenges before October 7th, like being a joint organization, a joint movement. I think all of us share the same issues
Can you
of
tell us about that?
like being perceived as like for Israelis being accused of like being traitors because they work with the Palestinians, for Palestinians being accused of normalizers because they are dealing with the enemy. And this kind of challenges has been going on for a long time. And I've witnessed it like recently, like it's been difficult, for example, to make arrangements in some places, like to book, for example, a meeting room in some places for a joint meeting. We get also rejected, like to have the space. So the Palestinian community is also quite scared, like of having these kind of joint meetings. Also, they are there is a lot of anger, so they are afraid of different reactions, maybe from other people of the community. So this also creates challenges for our work. For the Israeli part, I would say we're having also like this weekend a seminar for Israeli activists, and we were surprised by how many new members want to participate and even come to Beit Jala, which is in Area C, and be there. And they are all newcomers. They haven't been in the movement before, and we even had to say no for so many people because we don't have enough space to hold everyone. And that also gives me hope because there is still some people who are interested to join these joint movements and to learn about our work and to join the movement. And we've seen also before the war this movement of refuseniks and young teens refusing to join the army. They are getting to know what's going on in the occupied territories, and they are refusing to join the military for the oppressive system that it represents. And for the Palestinian community also, like I feel it's still challenging, how we are perceived as a movement. I feel I'm not sure exactly, but we have not been rallied against us, but still I feel like we have been recognized more internationally, like being asked to join interviews, like to hear our voices from Palestinians, from Israelis. And I feel that's also important to change the perception of people within our societies, like when they hear these voices, like speaking loudly.
Thank you, Rana. And this brings us to the end of our webinar, and I would like to thank our panelists, but I also would like to ask you for a final statement, a final thing that you would like to say to sum up. Rana?
Okay, for a last message, I know we're in a very, very dark moment right now, and this war has made it quite clear, but I feel there is hope, and our togetherness is the hope, despite how all these events try to threaten to separate us and from each other. We continue to choose each other, and it's the relationships that we have created for many years that are based on the real values of nonviolence and humanity, and our commitment to nonviolence and peace. And being together, it's very powerful, and it can transform our world. So we encourage you also to support these kind of initiatives that are very rare at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rana. May?
Yeah, I would say that this is one of the biggest crisis, at least since 48. And within that, we have to remember that there is also a moment of opportunity. And this moment of opportunity might be a historic one, and that leads us to really, really commit to it becoming that, fulfilling that opportunity. And I think that we have to choose that for ourselves and for our children. And as I said earlier, I think what Rana said is absolutely right. You know, at A Land for All, we share values and we share relationships, and we've been working a long time for both of those things. And we share, you know, we share a lot of things. But I think that our resilience comes from the fact that we do it for ourselves first and foremost. We do it for our own interests first and foremost, and that's what leads to a stronger partnership, and that's what leads to, you know, actually having mechanisms or ideas or visions or movements that can work. And I think that is the message, that we need to do it together, but we need to do it also separately, and that's the strength. And I encourage everyone to just get involved. This is the time. And if you know a person who isn't involved and wants to get involved, or might find this interesting, or have never heard about this, or is looking for hope, or is, you know, looking for something to get them out of the depression of this time, like, share this word with them, because we're doing it, and we're here, and we're happy, you know, we're happy to have more partners for this journey.
Thank you, May. Thank you, Rana. And I would like to thank also everyone who have attended this webinar. Thank you so much for supporting Interact. This was the webinar, Women's Leadership in the Peace Movement. And if you would like to meet more amazing women, next week we have another webinar in January 15. Sign up for our newsletter, and please feel free to reach out for us for any questions. We look forward to see you again and receiving your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Emili and Rana.
Thank you. Nice having
Bye.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Goodbye.